Hello, everyone. 60 people already here. Let's maybe wait for a few more seconds. Welcome to today's roundtable about frameworks, do's and don'ts. I'm Per. I'll lead through the whole thing today a bit, but I guess we'll just wait for maybe one more minute for people to join. Yeah, feel free to use the chat. Maybe you can let us know where you're from. Zurich, nice. Spain, UK, Paris, Vietnam, India, great. Serbia, Ireland, awesome. From all over the place. Hello, hello. Cool. I guess let's just start. Maybe quick introduction from my side. As I just said, my name is Per. I work at airfocus in the CS team mainly. Sometimes I do things like this. I'll moderate the whole thing today a bit. We're joined by Adam, Lisa, and Daniel today to talk about prioritization frameworks. So I think we should start, guys. If you could maybe just quickly introduce yourself and tell us a bit who you are, what you do, and maybe fun fact about your PM work or something like that. Maybe you could start like this. Whoever wants to do it, who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll jump in. Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Thomas. I am currently a lead PM at a company called Smart Recruiters, where we help you hire better, faster, smarter. And also, run a consulting firm called Approaching One, where we help people understand strategy, particularly product leaders. Interesting fact about me, I started my career not in product, but as a mainframe engineer. Yes, mainframes still exist. In fact, they still have a majority of the world's code or active code on them, and they still you still use one every day, even if you don't think you do. So that's my fun fact.
Right,
What?
I'll just jump in next. My name is Lisa Mo Wagner. I'm a product coach based in Hamburg, Germany. And well, I coach people on product stuff on all kinds of levels. And a fun fact about my product career, looking back, the one thing that really made me feel like this is it, this is what I want to do, was an emoji. And that was back in the time when they were still called smileys. If you want to know more about that, you'll have to reach out to me and I'll tell you more, but this would probably be too much.
Okay, so I'll go next, or I'll go last. Yeah, I'm Daniel. Pleasure to be here. I would say I'm almost about 20 years into development of digital products, from developer to agile coach, and the last like 10 years in product management. Currently, I'm head of product growth at SaaS Group. We buy startups, software as a service startups, and help them grow. So I'm currently responsible for 10 SaaS startups. I'm a book author on product strategy and currently writing a book on prioritization of strategic roadmaps. So quite a nice fit. Lisa actually wrote an article for my first book, and we met face to face in Hamburg on a design sprint training, which was great. And yeah, I'm a freelance coach. When you ask about what's the fun fact about our PM journey, I never thought about my journey as a PM journey, as I got into project management quite late, I would say. But I started as a project manager in a digital agency, and I was pretty bad at the job from a project perspective. So I always missed the deadlines and the financials. But looking back at that, I think I was a pretty great product manager back then, but I wasn't in the role of a product manager. So I was always into conceptualizing and stakeholder management, but I cared about a great user experience, but I didn't care about the financial side of the project. So that's kind of my fun fact here.
Cool. Great to have you all here. So I guess let's jump right in. Since we talk about prioritization today, what would be interesting for me, maybe that could be a good starting point. Obviously, prioritization is important in almost every profession, right? But what would be interesting for me is just to hear a bit more about what you think that what makes it different in product management. Like, how is prioritization here more different, more important, or different in general? Maybe Adam, you could start again. What do you think?
Sure. So I think about this question a lot because the thing about product management is it's very ambiguous. And I think that's what makes us different. So I usually frame it like this. As product people, we do not have discrete output. Salespeople have quotas. Engineers have code. You know, whoever, right? There's a difference. There's a thing, right, that they can create and point to and show and say, "Hey, this is progress." For us as product managers, we don't have that, right? And if you are making something, you're probably doing it in an emergency context. It's not really something that you should be doing on a daily basis, much like a utility player in baseball. So really, we don't have a discrete output. And so that's what makes the prioritization different, because we're taking all these inputs from different places in the organization and trying to figure out what is more important, sometimes in a harder fashion, right, for a date or something along those lines, and sometimes in a softer fashion, more long term, which goes back to values that the company may have.
100%. Anything to add to that, Daniel? What do you think? How do you experience your prioritization?
Well, I think Adam is very on point here. It's a lot about ambiguity and uncertainty. I think what makes it unique for PM is that compared to other disciplines, it's not a tool. We don't use prioritization as simply a tool to achieve means. It's kind of the core value we add as a product manager. So the developers are kind of the most expensive resource we have in a company. And it doesn't matter if you're using a waterfall or an agile process or how much you improve your development team. It's a garbage in, garbage out process. So all the value is created by selecting the right things to work on. So that's kind of the main value we add as a product manager. So this takes prioritization as kind of the central point for us, and not just a tool we can or may use.
Great. By the way, I forgot something, guys. Lisa, sorry, before you answer. In case you have any questions about any of the topics that we talked about today, there is a question box down there beside the chat. So please use it if you want to. We're happy to answer any questions later on. Lisa, do you have anything to add? Sorry about that.
No worries at all. I mean, we want to get everyone's questions in, right?
For sure.
I can just second what the others already said. I think one of the things is that we are, as part of our role, facilitators and communicators between a lot of different groups. So we take in priorities from all these other teams, right? Like CS and marketing and sales and everyone. They have their own priorities. And our job is to kind of take all of those and keep the user in mind, and maybe also tech debt and all of those things, and then put all this in one big bucket and prioritize that. So I think it's like you already get a bunch of priorities, and you have to make sure that you don't frustrate people around you. So I think it can yield a lot more frustration than maybe another. Maybe also not, because I haven't prioritized as another role that much. So maybe also we do a bit more of it. Maybe.
Right. Let's maybe go a bit back to the basics. Like, what would you say? What would be a good starting point for let's say you're a PM, your new role, right? Like, what do you guys think? What could be a good starting point when it comes to prioritization, implementing the process, right? Do you think there are any common issues or misconceptions about this? How to approach this? What do you guys think? Daniel, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, sure. So I think most teams start with the basic formula and the basic framework of prioritizing with impact and effort, and just you know, doing the quotation of that, and then that's kind of their prior list. And I think that's a very bad mistake to simply take this framework for granted. It sounds very alluring because it's so easy to understand, but it in the end it doesn't provide that much value, while the Vedic thought is a good starting point. So one thing that I would always urge to is to never rely on formulas too much. So they can be very, very complicated, as the rice score with different weights and so on. And it's always just a conversation starter. Take it as some kind of checklist that you've thought about the reach of things, the impact of things, the confidence of things. That's always great, but never come to the conclusion that this feature got 97 points and it's 98 points, so we're going with a 98-point feature. It doesn't make sense. It's rather about making sure whatever you're developing is actually in your strategic fit, because it's from your prior framework, you might get a lot of great ideas, but what you will end with is the patchwork product consisting of a lot of great ideas in a not so great and not coherent way to put them together, which simply doesn't work. Rather work on a few mediocre things in the end, but they have a lot of strategic focus and a very, very nice fit together that always has a bigger impact. So I say those two things I would concentrate on first when thinking about a framework, and making sure the mindset behind that and the actual reason for deploying a framework is the right one.
Great. Lisa.
Yeah, my first thought was exactly that: strategy. Most of the time when teams or companies have issues with prioritization, it's because there's no clear strategy. Because strategy is the thing that helps you make decisions, and prioritization is making a bunch of decisions in a row, right? So I think it's super, super important. So the first thing I always do is make sure there is a strategy, and if not, I'll start creating one with the people that can help me with that. Since I go into places as a coach, it's usually not just me creating it. I find the people that should and help them do it. And then it doesn't really matter which framework you end up choosing if you're aligned on your strategy, and you have product principles and those kinds of things that help you make decisions.
Adam, anything to add? What do you think?
Yeah. I love this topic. Lisa really jumped on one of the things that I have like underlined in my notes, right? Which is strategy, right? Strategy is going to be the thing that creates your prioritization. And one of the benefits of coming on, and this is going to be a continuing theme through this answer, that one of the benefits of coming on board as a new PM is you have a honeymoon period. You have a grace period. Generally, and in that period, it's a perfect time to go out and understand what the strategy is, because there's always a strategy. Now, is it explicit or is it not? That's a whole different question. However, something is happening, something is driving folks to do something, right? And so as a PM, your job, especially as you come on board to a new team, is to figure out what that is, because inside of that answer, you're going to start understanding what are the third rails, what are things people are scared of, what are things that get people fired. You're going to start understanding all of those things, and that's going to come into play into your analysis and the strategy you eventually create. I think another thing I would like to add on top of that is when you take on somebody else's work, you're taking on their assumptions. And if you are lucky, they have left some kind of document or strategy that lets you understand what assumptions are being made. And you can kind of take that and use that as a place to start asking questions, as a conversation starter, as Daniel said, like, right. Sometimes sometimes that can be a formula. I hate if it is, but sometimes it can be, right? It can give you some insight. That's the thing. You're taking on their assumptions. Oftentimes, most times, you're not going to get any of that. And so you have to go figure out what the assumptions are in the organization. And you do that by talking to people, not just the people inside of your direct product development team, but take advantage of going out and just getting coffee with as many stakeholders as you can to understand, again, what are their fears. Probably a lot of them feel like they haven't been listened to or something, right? Go get all that, go bring that in, because that's going to make your job far more easier in the future. Oh, and lastly, looking for contradictions, right? That's the other side of this too, and one I don't really hear as much, but I want to start bringing it into how we talk about this. There's usually one or two or three contradictions. Take advantage of your kind of honeymoon status to ask harder questions around those contradictions. We say A and we do B, but they're talking about being fast in one area and slow in other. This doesn't match, right? Sit down and ask about it. Just go ask the principal people involved. See if you can get them in a room and hammer out these differences. So again, prioritization as a kind of a downstream effect of these conversations becomes much easier, right? You're aware of the contradictions and the assumptions that are being made.
Right. I think go for it, Daniel. Sorry.
Before we move on, I wanted to add one aspect I think is often overlooked. It's whatever framework you choose, you should factor in your confidence around your assumptions, and you have some formula with rating an impact from 1 to 5 and so on. Factor in the confidence and make this like the biggest barrier there is. I always like to tell my teams the easiest way to move something up in the prioritization, if you think this should be on number 1, don't try to make clear this has more impact or this has a lower effort. Try to show that you have more confidence, you have more data, run experiments, and therefore try to push the whole essence of product discovery, of running experiments, running prototype tests, push that into your process by making confidence kind of the deciding factor in what you develop and what not. So whatever framework you choose, just make sure confidence is a part of that.
Great. Cool. I think all three of you have mentioned that in some way, like, as I think Lisa specifically said, like, obviously you have to collaborate with different teams as a PM all the time, and engineers, design, sales, CS, right? So and so on. Do you have maybe some tips how to prioritize cross-functionally, especially when they might use different frameworks as well in other teams? I guess that could be interesting as well. Daniel, what do you think? Any ideas? Any tips?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I'm not that worried about other teams using other frameworks. So how they come up with their priorities, actually, I don't care that much about that. I don't think there's a lot of clash between frameworks here or processes. The thing is, when we talk about priorities, I would always try to not talk about single feature requests or single features or even single items on your list in your backlog. I would rather you show that you're listening to them, you try to listen to understand, you take their thoughts, their priorities seriously. But in the end, what you want to achieve is you want to align on the bigger picture. You align on the actual outcome you're after. You align on the current strategy, and that might differ after like 6 months or 12 months. Your strategy might change. So you don't discuss this once at the beginning of the life cycle of your product and stick with this. You might align every few months on this. But if you're totally aligned, and this is very clear, it's not like some fluff. We want to be best product management software, something like that. But if you're very on point with your strategy, then it's just super obvious why you chose this prioritization and why these themes, these problems, these features are an actual outcome of your strategy. So try to align on the bigger picture and don't really talk about the prioritization feedback and the process behind this. It's not that important. If they trust what you're aligned them with, then they will trust the decisions you made based on these strategy decisions.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because you want to make sure, I mean, if things are going well, everyone in the company should have the same goals, like the same big overarching goals. I think you run into issues once everybody has different goals and they do not align because there's maybe not a strategy that's explicit, but everybody has their own idea of the strategy and what it is. Like I've literally have a customer where the sales team says enterprise users are our main priority, and then product has these OKRs that says we want to focus on mid-sized companies, and that's going to be a problem. So I think that's really, really important. Like you have to not only align your product strategy to your company strategy, but all the teams need that alignment. And another thing I always find helpful is before you even go to that level of like prioritizing ideas or bets, or you can call them features, you should prioritize your problems that you want to solve before you even go to that next step. And I think that will help you, and do it in a very transparent way. Do it together with the others. Like whatever framework they use, you're like, okay, I hear what you think is important. Here's also what I understand the underlying problem is. Is that right? Let's go and like solve this together, maybe even. And then it's a lot easier for them to understand your prioritization and not get as frustrated because you will have to say no to people. It's like one of the product management things, you have to say no. But you're not actually saying no. You're saying not right now, potentially, or you might actually say no if it's like totally out of the way of like whatever you want to strategically actually do. If it makes no sense at all, but if everyone's aligned, that shouldn't really happen. But also then reality happens. So we all know sometimes it's just bonkers, but overall, alignment always helps.
So I think I want to just plus one a lot of what Lisa said there in terms of like problem. Like if you have a clear problem set that everyone's going after, then a lot of the tension that exists goes away because you all can look at the problem and say, okay, we're aligned on this. So this, and this doesn't make sense, right? We all agree, right? We all have this one road that we're moving towards. I say that also that there is going to be tension, right? Because other teams have different incentives that are just going to be natural. Sales and they're cats and dog groups, right? Sales and marketing, right, are going to be cat and dog groups. Sometimes product and sales are going to be cat and dog groups. And so I think the thing to think about and why problems are great to base this off of is that you can commit to a problem, right? You can commit time. We're making an agreement that we're all going to spend at least 20% of our time on this, right? And that creates a shared bond on what major problem that the organization or the company is going to go deal with, right? At a minimum, that should be established, right? We have a thing that we're all going to pull towards. I think the other thing that's super important, and I think both Daniel and Lisa mentioned this, right? Like what you do, how you prioritize is important, right? I look at it like whether you use bulleted lists, unordered lists, ordered lists, numbers, letters, right? Like we're making a list, right? However you make the list is fine with me. I think what's important to know is what is your tension? What is non-negotiable tension that exists with you? And let's figure out a way to maneuver through that, because if we don't put that on the table, people are just going to assume that you don't like them, or people will create a story in their heads about why you're saying no to something, right? And this is advice I would tell every cross-functional leader that I come in contact with, right? Like, let's be very clear about the non-negotiables, right? If there's a particular, for example, for sales, if there's a particular minimum deal size that it makes sense that the rest of this is product-led growth, and we don't want to put any more other resources into deals less than $10,000 because it just doesn't make sense for us. Say that publicly. Like, people don't know that generally. And so getting that out on the table can help people understand, not just the product person and the salesperson, but the rest of the organization, help them understand what's behind your decision making. And yeah, so I think on that note, understanding how people think about decisions is far more important than any framework that is being put in front of you. And so if you can understand where those non-negotiables are, where the tension's coming from, and put that out personally, things will flow a lot better.
Great. I think we talked about a few really high level, let's say paradigms, approaches already, but I thought it might also make sense to still dig a bit deeper in detail and see, maybe we could still take a look at why you would choose a specific framework, right? So what the criteria would be, what do you think that what should your decision be based on? Would it be the product life cycle, the team size, or anything else that you can think about where you would say, okay, that would influence my decision on how to approach the whole thing in general? Lisa, do you want to start?
Sure. So for this one, I would kind of go with the Agile Manifesto, like people over process. And I do that for a lot of things. People will ask me, oh, what's like your favorite way to write user stories or something? I'm like, that doesn't really matter to me that much. You tell me what you need. So it kind of depends on my peers. It depends on the team that I'm working with. I can make anything work. So there's not just like one framework that I use religiously. I'll just make sure it works for everyone. Everyone understands it. Because I think, especially the ones we said this before, right? The formula ones where you're just like, oh, you put this number in and then that number divided by this number and that. They are fun. Like, I love those. They are fun. You put your numbers in, you get a score. You're like, yeah, this is awesome. But they are a bit of a slippery slope because that feels very scientific because you put numbers in there. So we kind of need to remind ourselves that all the numbers we came up with are still guesstimations. Like, we did look into a crystal ball or magic 8-ball or something and be like, yeah, this is what I think this impact will be. Like, yeah, big, medium, small impact, I don't know, but I'm still guessing. So whatever works for the people. If for some people it feels too scientific and they just kind of follow it to a point where it might actually not benefit them anymore, maybe something else is better. Or if you have a bunch of teams that are super wild all over the place, maybe it helps them to have something where it's just like, hey, put all your guesses together in here and it makes your best guess score. And that's a cool starting point to have a conversation.
Anything to add? Daniel, maybe. What do you think?
I'm 100% with this on Lisa's take. So yeah, basically anything will work if your team gets it and uses it. Still, I would say from the framework perspective, I would base this mostly on the product life cycle. So if you're very early stage, like pre-product market fit, perhaps even pre-MVP phase, it's not about something like RISE score, not even North Star fit. You don't have a North Star yet. I would say you prioritize mostly about learning effects, perhaps something like the Moscow prioritization or the Kano model. So you're basically trying to figure out what's the greatest value I should ship early and what should my MVP be consisting of. You don't want to move metrics. It's not important to move metrics, not even revenue. You're just figuring out what's helpful to your audience. You're trying to understand your audience. So whatever framework you choose, this should be the outcome. If you're more mature, if it's more about you're having a backlog of like 5,000 ideas and you have so many stakeholders and other teams and squads of developers, then it's about sifting through this massive backlog and working with that. So that's when I would, not from the formula, from the pure formula, but from the thoughts behind, I would introduce something like the RISE score, something like a North Star fit, an OKR fit, as a proxy for a strategy fit. Perhaps something like bin stacking with this a method that I've been looking into the past month. I've been quite successful with. And sometimes at the end of the life cycle, so you're losing your product market fit, you're into like pivoting. You could start out with something like an opportunity tree, and then just bring this together with your user journey map and try to pinpoint a thing where you think you can create a lot of impact and a lot of value, and then start with the early stage thought about that again as a fresh company, trying to evolve out of the existing company. But long story short, I would base this on the life cycle.
Can I throw in one little thing? If you have a backlog of 5,000 things that you have to sift through and prioritize, you just delete that whole thing and you start over. That might actually make you a lot happier.
Get rid of it. Get rid of it. It's not helping anybody. It's just bringing anxiety to the entire organization. Get rid of it. I think not much to add to what Daniel and Lisa said here, right? Like the idea of thinking about it through whatever part of the life cycle you're in, whether it's explore, expand, exploit, right? Wherever you are in that kind of chart will determine how much heft you need in your prioritization, right? Earlier in the process, light. Later in the process, there's a lot more tension and table stakes around how this product needs to operate, because there should be some sort of fit. There should be a lot more data that tells us, where not to go as opposed to where to go. But yeah, but for the most part, like Lisa said, right, people over process. Whatever's going to cause the least amount of tension as a starting place. I think the most important thing is to iterate and think about how that prioritization is happening. Is it helping your goals? Is it helping you get closer to alignment and accomplishing what you're setting out to do? Talk about that, right? Talk about that during your retros. And if it's not serving you, get rid of it, right? Move on, try something else. I think it's more important to think about, keep thinking about things that work, keep them in, and then get rid of the things that don't. Because if you don't, because you become, unfortunately, what a lot of teams end up being, right, is they just kind of they get set in their ways, and they can't tell you why they do anything. Quick anecdote that keeps me thinking of that. There was a great grandchild that was cooking a roast for dinner, and her mother told her to cut the roast in half before you put it in the oven. And she was like, "Why do you do that?" And the mother was like, "I don't know. Let me go ask your grandmother." The mother asked the grandmother, "Hey, why do we cut the roast in half before we put it in the oven?" The grandmother says, "I don't know. Let me go ask your great grandmother." All right, she goes and asks the great grandmother, "Why do you cut the roast in half?" And the great grandmother goes, "Wait, you guys still cut the roast in half? We only did that because our oven was small," right? And understanding, right? Like a lot of things, unfortunately, that we work with follow that same trajectory. Somebody set it up in the past, and now we just continue on with. So always question the tools that are around you to see if they are serving your needs.
Great, thanks. I'm not sure if you can even ask this one, but I think I have to. I just have to ask it. Do you have any favorite frameworks, and do you even maybe have a secret custom-made one that works out well for you? Or maybe it's a secret and you don't want to say. I'm not sure. Daniel, what do you think? Or Adam?
Not a secret. Not a secret.
No secret.
I can tell you guys. Um, yeah, actually, two things that I haven't mentioned so far. So the first thing, and it's not really part of the prioritization framework, but I always like to create, at least for internal feature requests and ideas, some kind of barrier. Just like, hey, we love if other teams submit their ideas, but please use this form. And afterwards, please schedule a 2-hour session with me to go through this so we can talk about this. And all of a sudden, 90% of your feature requests just vanish. They don't find the time to do that. And I always tell them, it's very easy. If you want our developers to spend 3 months on this, it should be worth 2 hours to you to think about this and not just jot down a 2-sentence mail and just throw it over the fence and expect the product team to ship this next month. So creating a barrier is one of my must-have parts of the prioritization framework, so that the actual framework can just work with a lot of less items. And the second thing is I always urge my product managers to do a quick back of the napkin calculation. So we always have this notion of this will have a big impact. This will be the next big thing. I said, great, it doesn't need to be super accurate, but please try to make a small calculation. What change in user churn are you expecting? How many people will upgrade? How many people will sign up? How will this affect our conversion rates? And why do you think so? And in the end, a lot of great features just turn out to be just a zero. So it sounds really great, but if you think about it, people will love this, but nobody will pay for this. Nobody will upgrade for this. It won't affect our churn. It won't reduce customer tickets. It will literally have no impact on our product at all. That does not mean that this is like a barrier again, just because it's zero financially speaking, it shouldn't be developed. That's not the case. But it just is a sanity check to see if all these great promises and this high, you put a 5 on the impact in your RISE score, just actually is based on something. And it just takes half an hour, and it's a really helpful thing to, again, just put out a lot of the ideas out of the equation at all. So I would just throw those two in. After that, I really like the RISE score, not because of the formula, but because of the different aspects. You're thinking about how many of our customers are affected. You're thinking about how big is the impact for one of them. You're thinking about the confidence and the effort. So I think it got all the different aspects you need to think about. Not very keen on just plugging in the formula and calling it a day, but the ideas behind this are pretty universal and a great starting point for most teams.
Who wants to go, guys?
I can continue. They don't really have like a favorite prioritization framework either. I wouldn't call it a secret custom made one either, but I have a way of approaching things. So actually there's one that I have that is for MVPs where, because I just remembered that because you guys pointed it out, where it's just like what Daniel said in the product lifecycle, like things are different, right? So for MVPs, I got that from, I think they're called the working group. They have a Medium article out there that's called the Product Definition Canvas. And one part of it is to define an MVP, and they just have 3 categories for that. So all the features that you think your MVP should have, you have to kind of put them into signature, core, and other. Your signature feature is like the one thing you don't want people to forget about. So Netflix is always a great example. For Netflix, it's the browse screen. Like that's their one signature feature that makes them so much better than all the others. Like that's the one thing that's just like, yes, this is amazing. Now, you still need some other features with it because, you know, if you have a great browse screen but no video players, it's not going to be a good experience. So you have your core features, the ones that are really at a minimum necessary so that your thing can actually work. So it might be a login because, you know, you have like recurring users and stuff like that. So all of those things that you really cannot live without at all, but that are not your signature feature, those go into core, and everything else goes into other. And other means you're not building it. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. For like existing products, I kind of try to ask myself or my team a few questions. So, is it a step towards our vision? If it's a no, it's out. It doesn't even get like a 99 or 100 on the score or whatever, like, if you just rank them, it's out. Does it align with the strategy? Do enough, and also because in your strategy, you kind of know, like, who's my target user? What's the market like? Like, do enough people have this problem actually? So it's worth solving. If there's a no, it's out. Does it pay into my current product goals? Like OKRs or whatever you use, does it pay into those? If it's a no, it can go on the pile of things you might look at in 6 months, but probably not. So you could also just throw it out. Is it technically doable? Ask your team. If they're like, that sounds great, but this is insane, it's not gonna work, you can stop pursuing it. And then the last bit is like your confidence. And that is something that I do with my team together. So we want to say how confident we are in the fact if this will move the needle on my KRs or like my metrics that I have, that I'm trying to work towards. And what I like to do with my teams, because it's also fun, and I stole that from Scrum, is poker, where we do confidence poker. So we usually just kind of do like out of 10 and just use our hands and be like, okay, so we talked about all the things, everybody could ask all their questions. So now we'll just do a countdown and just kind of show how confident we are that it will move the needle, which is great because it involves the team in it. And it sparks conversations again, because we do the same thing, in Scrum with your planning poker. If someone has a really high number and someone has a really low number, you talk about it. And that works super, super well. And it's kind of fun.
I love that answer, Lisa. Like, I hope you've written somewhere about that framework. It sounds like, I'd love to read it. And I love what you mentioned at the end there too, about looking at the tension, right? Oftentimes you'll find out people don't care about things as much. They may say it, they don't care, right? And just having a way of just gauging that, 1 to 10, how important is this, can lead to a whole bunch of clarity that you may not expect, right? Because when we hear something, we always like automatically assume it's probably an 8, 9, or 10, or else why would somebody bring it up? Sometimes it's a 2, and you go, oh, okay. I think I'll add 2 different frameworks that are maybe a level up from some of the things mentioned here. In terms of strategic frameworks, I do enjoy Richard Rumelt's framework for strategy in Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Having a diagnosis, a guiding policy, and next actions very clear to the team, along with pairing with some of the things that were mentioned here, create a very clear way forward for folks, right? And can do a lot in terms of getting tension out of the team, or unnecessary tension. Tension's good, but a lot of tension that we have is unnecessary. Focus on the good tension, leave the rest behind. The other thing that I've been really getting into, feels like you start getting into this, the longer you do product management, you run into it, is Cynefin, of course. And so Cynefin, as a way to understand knowledge, right? As a way to see and deal with whether something is clear all the way through to chaotic, and then creating practices for each. I've found this super helpful in terms of just getting some clarity on things that where you can build process for, right? If it's clear or complicated, go build a process and figure it out. Versus complex or chaotic, where it's like process is actually bad, really bad for whatever we're about to get into. We just need to build short feedback loops and figure this out. Just that amount of clarity as well, as I've seen be super helpful lately in terms of helping people understand how to think about the knowledge that they're receiving.
Cool. We have a lot of questions, but maybe we could do one quick, one last one from my side, and then we can just take the rest of the time for the for the rest of the questions. So I just quickly wanted to ask, just for your day-to-day job, can you give any recommendation when it comes to tools? And like, do you use one for prioritization, like a dedicated PM tool for prioritization? And what do you expect from a tool like that? Maybe Adam, do you use one?
No, not really. I'll be honest, I don't really use a prioritization tool because I'm thinking for the day to day, I'm thinking more on the operation level. So like, thinking about different teams across the portfolio, 2 different portfolios. A lot of my headspace is kind of up here. And then the prioritization becomes, in a sense, easier because people up here can only retain but so much information. So my job is really to shrink that as much as possible, which as long as I'm doing the homework is a lot easier to manage. But the hard part is the homework and the constant talking, right? That's and starting to understand all the things that we're talking about here, back alongside with the PMs, and then also my peers, whether that's a director of design or director of engineering, director of sales, whomever, director of customer success, right? So in terms of prioritization, not much more than this guy, pen and paper, and some Excel to keep things kind of in front of me over time, and that's pretty much it.
Lisa, do you use something? Any recommendations?
Yeah, I don't really use any product management tools because I usually, as a coach, I kind of don't really use them myself anymore. One thing I want to say though is if you use tools, make sure you find a tool that serves your workflow and not model your workflow after the tool you use, because that happens a lot. So, and then it just gets really complicated and annoying for everyone. But overall, I think there are a few good product management tools out there. So obviously, I like airfocus because like you're my Hamburg buddies anyways, and I do think your tool is really cool. Can I say names of other tools, or are you gonna just cut me off? Okay. I do like ProdPad as well for some of the stuff, but it really also depends. As I said, find whatever like your workflow is and what you need, and then find the right tool for that. And also pen and paper is great. I love Mural. I pretty much do Mural boards for everything. It's just a whiteboard, like everyone can just go wild on there. So that might also be a good starting point. Product manager's favorite answer. It depends.
It's a shot. We finally got to it. It's a shot for everybody. It depends has been mentioned. We're here.
Daniel, any opinion, any ideas, or should we just? Yeah. Do you want to say something for that?
Yeah, I'm a complete tool nerd. So like for task management, I think I just tried every tool there is. And I dabbled with most of the product management tools. But early on, I learned, and it never really stuck with me. But I get it. A fool with a tool is still a fool. So it's not about the tool actually, and I'm in a similar situation as Lisa, so I kind of just work with what the teams that I'm working with are currently using and what they're familiar with. But I've recommended airfocus quite a few times, and some teams adopted this, and they're quite happy with this. And perhaps one thing to mention is overall, I try to get away from having to prioritize at all. So like this situation where you have like a list of 100 things you want to rank, I usually try to don't have that situation, but just have, like all the product managers, they make a big fuss out of the roadmap. If you have a super great vision, if you have a solid strategy with a big analysis behind this and some assumption testing, a good discovery process and so on, then your priorities, your roadmap, the things you're working on, is just super obvious out of this strategy. So if you have the need to rely on pure prioritization, then it shows for me a lack of strategy. So there are quite a lot of companies that just can work with a good strategy and a good vision and never have to talk about prioritization at all. So I always favor that if possible. And if not, use the tool you have. And if you don't have a tool, use airfocus.
Cool. Obviously, is exactly what I wanted to hear. Um, Daniel, I actually have another question for you
Sure.
from Victor. As you mentioned, I think pretty early on, you work with multiple startups, right? Do you prioritize the same way for with all of them? What decides which prioritization framework you'll use in case you do with what?
Well, actually, I give them quite a lot of freedom, and I think there's no one size fits them all solution here. And not only regarding prioritization, what I do is I have a minimum baseline of product management principles that I want all my startups to actually use. So, like having a roadmap, having a user journey map. I don't care in what software they make the user journey map, and I don't care how detailed it is. I want them to have one and to think about this. And so if they don't have any prioritization framework at all, I guide them towards North Star fits and the RISE score, just as a starting point to get them started. But after that, I just coach them into the direction that's necessary for them. And they're all in different life cycle phase. They're all in different team sizes and distributed around the world. So it's really depending on the product and the team. But I'd say the RISE thing is at least a good starting point, as mentioned before.
Cool. Another question from Ben. What tools or techniques do you have and or use to uncover the product strategy or nearest thing available to help us as your foundation for prioritization? Any ideas?
So
Lisa?
I have created something that I ended up calling the everything product canvas, which is not a canvas that is like an actual canvas, but it's a mix of a lot of things that I've learned along the way, and I just put it all into one giant mural board, and it looks wild. But to give you a bit of an idea, and maybe I should write about this as well. So I like the 5 or 6 questions that Roger L. Martin put out there, playing to win, for strategy, to kind of understand, like to kind of make it visible, right? So you start out with like, what are your aspirations? So those are your big business goals, vision. Sometimes company vision or company mission is the same as your product vision. Sometimes it's not. Just make it explicit, write it down somewhere, right? All the big picture things, your aspirations. If there's anything in there that's measurable, that's great. You want those things. And then it's like, where do we want to play and where don't we want to play? So that's the market. So I do very classic business administration, like what's it called? Sam, Tom, Tam. Just look it up. Yeah. But you look at the market sizes and you do SWOT analysis or competitive analysis. For competitive analysis, I really like there's a template in Confluence actually that I found really helpful. So I kind of use that one. So I put that as like an extra little area on my gigantic board, right? And then where it's also like, okay, so market, but also who's my target audience? So I have like my primary, secondary, maybe tertiary customer and their key needs. And so I put like empathy maps in there as well, and like half of a value proposition canvas. You see how this is like just going crazy? Yeah. So strategy is hard. Strategy needs a ton of information and it takes a lot of time. And so I have this template for myself, and there's lots and lots more parts in there. There's also things in there that I got from Melissa Perry's book, Escaping the Build Trap. There's stuff in there that I got from Gibson Biddle. So, how to delight your customers in margin enhancing, hard to copy ways. You can either do impact mapping or an opportunity solution tree. So Tim Herbeck has done a lot of impact mapping, even though he's not the one that invented it, but he has great explanations about it. Teresa Torres does the opportunity solution tree. So I just take all these things that I need and then can kind of just make sense to me. And I start filling it out whenever I go into a new team. So I'll talk to the teams and find out what they know. And then I go to like the first level leader and then the next one and the next one until I hit the CPO or CEO to find all the information that I need. It takes a lot of time, but once you start writing it down and other people see it, they're actually like, oh, wait, no, that's kind of not like that. And that's when you get like all the details and the good stuff. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on that. Just like, I think what you said at the end is just super duper important, right? Having a source of truth document to start every conversation with and hand out because like all of these tools are fantastic. Like I think we're living in a golden age of tools for product people. And don't get me wrong, the reason why I'm saying I don't have one to recommend is because a lot of them are just really, really good in terms of getting what you need. And as Lisa said, even Confluence has good stuff at this point, right? Like there's good stuff everywhere. And so the most important thing is to like, don't keep it up here. Show your work. And the more you show your work and pass that along, a lot of this gets easier and easier because people now have, there's a point of view and you can start to see those contradictions I mentioned earlier in order to start to close those loops, those open loops.
If I might add here as well, that I think this is a super important topic and it's the basic of what we're talking about. I do have a very, very pragmatic tip that I always share with my teams. If you have no idea where to start with strategy and then you want to set the sales into a specific direction, I'm a big fan of the Blue Ocean strategy canvas. And how I explain it typically is you think about all the parameters between in the market you're competing with that make up the buying decision. So it might be the sexiness of your product, the price, if it's geared towards the expert users or beginner users. And you think about this as little sliders on your like an equalizer if you're from that age. And you talk about you try to reverse engineer the equalizer, the sliders of your competitors, and then you find a niche in there. Where do you want to, at what slider you want to actually compete with your competition? Where do you want to excel, and where you deliberately want to be a bit worse than the competition? And do you compare that with your status quo? And then you have your biggest gaps. And that's all the strategy in the beginning might be. You just have, these are the 3 gaps we need to bridge. We want to excel here. We are on the lower end right now. We want to focus on beginners. We're right now very expert focused. Your 2 gaps. You just take those 2 gaps and make us a part of your strategy. Like for the next 12 months, we only work on things in our product that bring us from here to here in those 2 things. That's a very neat and easy way to start the conversation here and to find a focus. You can do a lot better when working with strategy, and this can be a lot more advanced. But if you have no idea where to start, try to uncover these gaps from where you are right now and where you want to be in this blue ocean thing. And this will give you like at least an 80% version of a good strategy.
Start where you are.
Nice. That's great. We have exactly 1 minute left. It's already over. Maybe we could close with one liner from each of you. What do you think after our conversation today? What's your key takeaway for the audience of today from today's talk? What do you think?
A prioritization conversation is really a strategy conversation first.
Yeah, what Adam said.
+1.
No one can compete with that. Okay. Okay, great. All right, I guess that's it. Thanks a lot for being here. That was super interesting and insightful. We'll see each other for the next one. Also, everyone who joined, thanks for joining. Have a great rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, morning. Yeah, have a good one. Thanks, guys. Ciao.